Ricardo Pietreczko becoming only the second German player to win a PDC senior title, beating Peter Wright 8-4 in Sunday night's final to win the German Darts Championship. And we're going to go straight into our question of the week, which we posed to our listeners at the start of the week, and it's off the back of Ricardo's title win. Our question of the week, of course, sponsored by Condor Darts. We asked our listeners who will be the first German player to reach a PDC major final. The options: Gabriel Clemens, Martin Schindler, Sunday's winner Ricardo Pietreczko, or other. Who are you going for?
Ooh, I mean, maybe we should get Condor Airlines to sponsor the question as well, since we're talking about German darts here. It's a German-based airline for those who don't know. But yeah, that's a tough question. And, before this week, I don't think we would have said Ricardo Pietreczko because, well, obviously he's emerged this year. He hadn't clinched his spot in the European Championship before this, but he was provisionally in. And even if he'd lost his first match, the way results ended up going, he would have qualified anyway. He just missed out on the World Grand Prix. And he kept getting better and better, and we were seeing more and more of him, and he certainly had bottle. He certainly had grit. And I think we knew he was a player who was on the up and at some point would be likely to take the next step. But what was that next step? Was it making a final? Was it qualifying for big television events, winning a few matches in a big televised event? That's probably what we were thinking. We weren't thinking it was winning a European tour. We weren't thinking it would be throwing in a 10-dart leg against the darts in a last leg decider against someone who once won 20 consecutive last leg deciders on the European tour, a winner of 36 European tour events in Michael van Guren. We didn't think he would beat a two-time former world champion in Peter Wright in the final. That seemed like 3 more steps beyond where he had been. Not that he didn't have the talent, but he wasn't there yet. But he did it. And he was impressive. And he might not have been the best player the entire weekend, but he was the most determined. He was the most flawless. 8 out of 8 in the doubles in the finals. 14 consecutive doubles hit. That's absurd. Just going 8 out of 8 in the final. If you think of a double as a 40% possibility each time, getting 8 of them in a row is less than half of 1%, or just slightly more than half of 1% of the time we'll see that. And he did that. And that was on back of making 6 more of those. It was just phenomenal. Will he do it on television? Will he be the first German player to reach a PDC major final? That's the question. And I don't know, but he's definitely in the conversation. Gabriel Clemens, he's made a televised final in a World Series event. He's been around for a while. He has the game. He's regressed a little bit this year, but we're starting to see him get back. We're starting to see him get results again and be the force that he once was. But I don't think he's where he was a year ago. He's not playing as consistently at that time, but I think he's good enough to get back there. Martin Schindler, well, he just made his second major quarterfinal at the World Grand Prix a week ago. He's been consistently getting into the money end of all the non-televised events and being a force to be reckoned with more often in the televised events. He's right there in the conversation. But now so is Ricardo Pietreczko. But they're not the only ones. We haven't seen that much of Pascal Ruprecht yet, but he's a young player, won his tour card this year. We know he has oodles and oodles of talent. And with a couple more years on tour, he'll be in that conversation as well. I don't want to write off Max Hopp. Max Hopp has fallen off the tour. It's been a dark couple years in his terms of performances, but he had won a Euro Tour before 5.5 years ago, won another Players Championship event, moved into the top 32, qualified for a pair of world match plays, and was really playing at a level that on his correct week he could have broken through. I think we'll see him again. I don't think we've seen the last of Max Hopp. There's a lot of talent in German darts right now, and I'm sure there's another 3, 4, 5 players we didn't even mention, who we haven't even seen yet, who once we do see are going to be a force to be reckoned with themselves. But the question is, who will be the first? And will it be one of these 3? I think at least one of these 3 will make a final at some point. And I'm going to go with Martin Schindler. I just think Schindler keeps putting that little bit more on his game year in, year out. Falling off the tour for a year was the best thing that could have happened for him because it made him step back. It made him figure out what he wanted out of darts, what he thought he could get, and what he needed to do to get there. And that's not to say that before that his game wasn't in the right place. He was always a player who gave the most out of what he had on a given day. But the confidence had definitely gone by the time he'd fallen off the tour. And to fall off for a year and to regather everything, I think did him a world of good. And he is a much better player now. And he knows now that if a bad spell comes, it's just a bad spell, because he's a top 16 player, at the very least a top 32 player, which is why he's in the top 32. But I think he's a top 16 player, and he knows that, and he can handle a down month. He can handle a bad tournament. And I think that level of professionalism is going to get him over the line and into a major final first. So I'm going to go Martin Schindler. But I think that it could be any of these three. It could be someone else. And it would not surprise me if all three of them at some point in the future make a major final.
Yeah, definitely. And it's an interesting question to debate. And it's got a lot more interesting, you got to say, after the weekend that we've just had with Riccardo Pietrexco winning that Euro Tour title. And looking at the poll at the moment on Twitter, do go and have your say on there. 37% are agreeing with you, Bert, and they're going with Martin Schindler. 33% are going with the winner at the weekend, Riccardo Pietrexco, and 21% Gabriel Clemens, 9% going with other. Maybe they're thinking Max Hopp, maybe they're thinking of someone else. And we've had a comment from one of our listeners on YouTube, Boy You Crazy, that is their name, has said Pietrexco has so much time left in his career to reach one. I think very highly of Schindler as well, but he always seems to struggle to maintain form over the course of a tournament. That's their thoughts. And I agree with you. Before this past weekend, if we'd have run this poll, you were probably looking at Schindler and Clemens as the leading two in the poll, probably commanding the lion's share, maybe 80-85% of the vote between them. And they are both top 32 players now, well established in there. Clemens has been in the top 32 for best part of 3 years now, whereas as you mentioned with Martin Schindler coming back after losing his tour card, getting it back at Q School, and he's managed to get into that top 32 now as well. And I think the thing with those two players, surprisingly, is that between them, they've not won a senior title in the PDC yet. They've had some finals on the Pro Tour. They've had some big runs on TV, but they've not been able to do what Riccardo has done and win one of these titles. And you look at someone like Gabriel Clemens, and still less than 12 months ago, start of this year, we were talking about him getting to the semi-finals of the biggest tournament there is, Ali Pali, getting to the last four, and the way he dismantled Gerwyn Price in that quarter-final, who was the world number one at the time. So he's certainly a player that has got potential to do it, as does Martin Schindler as well. We've seen him get to a few quarterfinals in some of the major events this year as well. But we've got to talk more about Riccardo, because to produce that level of performance at the weekend, to win a Euro Tour and the way he did it as well, you mentioned some of the highlights there, the 10-darter in the decider against Michael van Gerwen in the semi-final. And then to follow it up, he surely would have been on a massive high after that. But to follow it up with a finishing display like he did in the final, 8 out of 8, and it's a huge step in the career. You mentioned about players, they make these steps, and with Riccardo Pietrexco, it does feel like he's made quite a few steps at one time there, just in that one evening. And we are going to see him in pretty much all the TV events now for the next 12 months. We're going to see him in the Grand Slam, the European Championship, Players' Championship Finals, World Championship, the Match Play, the Grand Prix. They're looking pretty good for him next year as well. So I can understand why a lot of our listeners are siding with Riccardo for this one, because the composure that he showed as well at the weekend was beyond his years of experience on the stage in the PDC. And I don't know where to put my vote. I think if you're a German darts fan, though, you've never had it better, have you? You've got two players in that top 32. You've now got a third player emerging in a big way like Riccardo Pietrexco is at the weekend. And I think all three have got a strong case to break that new ground. And I think they're all going to be pushing each other now to break that new ground. I think you've got Clemens and Schindler. They'll have watched what Riccardo did at the weekend. They'll be thinking, you know what, I've got the game to do that. I've beaten all these players before. I'm going to push myself even more now to try and emulate what he's done and go further. So, you know what, you went with Schindler. I'm going to go with Clemens. I think you can make a case for any of those three players, but I'm going to go with the player that the least amount of our listeners are going with at the moment. They've got a shorter percentage going with Clemens. So I'm going to back the man that was one game away from a world final not so long ago to get to a PDC major final first.